Good morning, everybody. We are on the Retribution Paladin. I'm going to be going over all the talents, gear stat priorities, and rotation, basically burst and sustain damage. What talents create the synergy and the actual damage with the Paladin. So going in on the left side, what we are going to be looking at mainly is our Divine Resonance. So after casting Divine Tool, you instantly cast Judgment every 5 seconds for 15 seconds. Divine Tool's right above it. So what we're going to be using this for is basically a holy power generation to get as many Hammer of Lights out. We are running the Templar heroic talents, and we want to try and get out as many of Hammer of Lights as possible. So that's going to require 5 holy power. So we're going to be using Divine Resonance to help us obtain that a lot quicker. And I'll go into that on the rotation side. We're also taking Healing Hands. We want to reduce the cooldown on Lay of Hands as soon as possible and increase the healing of Word of Glory. Word of Glory, if you have not used it, it heals for a lot nowadays, and I love it. I love the changes and the buffs that they've done to it. It's phenomenal. We're also taking Blinding Light over Repentance or Repentance. So the reason why we want Blinding Light is because it is a ranged AoE type of CC. It's on a 1.5-minute cooldown, but we want that just so we can quickly CC somebody real fast. We are also taking Greater Judgment. So the reason why I'm emphasizing Greater Judgment is because the Judgment causes the target to take 20% increased Holy Power ability damage, and it may overlap. Meaning if I cast Judgment and I cast another Judgment, it's going to get a stack of Greater Judgment. So that's going to not increase, let's say 2 Judgments make it 40%. It doesn't work that way. It's a stack. So if I cast a Final Verdict, it's going to be 20% stronger, and for every Final Verdict, it's going to take a stack away. So it doesn't increase the damage per stack. It's just a stack of a debuff for you to increase your holy power damage on that target, which I just used Final Verdict in that instance. Hammer of Light also benefits from that. There's a lot of synergy when it comes to Judgment, which is why we're taking Divine Toll and getting a better Judgment every 5 seconds from Divine Toll itself. Alright, that is it for our left side for the most part. We are obviously taking Avenging Wrath. That's going to be part of our burst. We're taking a bunch of other defensive abilities, and I'll go into what defensive abilities do what in our rotation section. Going on the right side, we are grabbing Improved Blade of Justice, which now has 2 charges, which is we're going to need that for better fluidity of our rotation, just to increase our holy power generation. We're taking Swift Justice to reduce the cooldown of Judgment by 2 seconds. And we're grabbing Final Verdict, of course, to replace our Templar's Verdict. Final Verdict is basically you use that whenever you're in a single target situation. You don't really want to utilize Divine Storm right here, which is your AoE move. Even in arenas, maybe BGs, but in arenas you don't really want to utilize this. Because we have talents in this build that help our Final Verdict to cast a free Divine Storm. I think it's like at 25% effectiveness. So we are grabbing Improved Judgment. Now has 2 charges, which, like I said, Judgment's going to be a major factor in our synergy. Grabbing Art of War to reduce our cooldown of Blade of Justice instantly, increase the critical strike chance by 10%. We want to be trying to able to cast Blade of Justice as much as possible. Critical strikes of your damaging buildings and single target holy power abilities grant you 5% haste. Haste is phenomenal. If you guys have not tried like a haste Ret Pally build, it feels so good. I think it was in Warlords of Draenor where you actually had a ton of haste on your burst, and you were casting crazily quickly and just hitting hard. It was so nice. Alright, so we're also grabbing Vanguard's Momentum over Sanctify because we want our Hammer of Wrath has an additional charge. That's going to go into our burst synergy as well. Grabbing Crusade over Avenging Wrath Might. We want that Crusade for all that haste and the stacks and the damage. I mean, it just goes so well with our burst. We're also grabbing Templar Strike over Crusading Strikes. This is a great filler and gives us more holy power generation as well. Does great damage. It's an overall great addition. If you haven't tried Ret Pally in a while, this is a new addition when the War Within pre-patch I think were released. We are going to be taking Final Reckoning over Execution Sentence, and then Final Reckoning and Execution Sentence durations are increased by 4 seconds. We're also going to be grabbing Divine Arbiter, and I want to touch on this because our High Lord's Judgment Holy Strike damage abilities grant you a stack of Divine Arbiter. At 25, your next damaging single target Holy Power ability causes X amount of damage to your primary target and people within 6 yards. So that plays a huge role in our Final Verdict and our Hammer of Light talents. Just to take note of that, it's going to give us a lot more damage and burst power. And then next, we're going to be also taking Holy Flames. Holy Flames is going to give us a passive for Divine Storm, increased 10% damage, and when it hits an enemy affected by your expurgation, it spreads the effect up to 4 targets hit. Now, in AoE scenario, that works really well, but the main reason why we took this talent is because you deal 3% increased holy damage to targets burning from expurgation. So we definitely want that, just for that little bit of increased damage over this AoE spread utilizing Blade of Justice. So we don't actually need that. I would much rather have a harder hitting holy power spending ability. We're also being grabbed in Judge, Jury, and Executioner. Holy power spending generating abilities have a chance to cause your next Final Verdict to hit additional 3 targets at 80% effectiveness over the Empyrean Power Crusader Strikes. Because we're not really using Crusader Strikes, we don't actually need that. This is just going to give us a better spread of our damage if anybody's nearby. We are grabbing Shield of Vengeance, which is going to create a barrier of Holy Light. It's basically a shield, and it's going to explode once the shield goes away. It's on a minute cooldown. This is an extremely good defensive to protect us overall. So definitely spec into that over Aegis protection. And that is going to wrap up our left and right side. Going over to our heroic talents, we are, like I said, playing Templar. And Hammer of Light is our new hardest hitting move if you want to blow somebody up. So hammer down your enemy with the power of light, dealing 440 X amount of damage and more to AoE. Additionally, calls down an Imperial Hammers from the sky to strike 3 nearby targets for X amount of damage. So that's going to be a great synergy with our Wake of Ashes move, and Wake of Ashes turns into that skill that it requires 5 holy power, which is the max that you have. So we want to be able to generate as much holy power in that window as much as possible. Now our Empyrean Hammers, so Hammer of Light instantly calls down 2 Empyrean Hammers on your target when it's cast. This Templar build has phenomenal synergy just in itself, because we're going to be relying on that Hammer of Light and then Empyrean Hammers as well. And we're grabbing this talent here is Divine Steed, lasts 2 seconds longer, and increases your speed by 30 seconds for the first 3 seconds. This is a huge thing. If you guys have not played with this buff to your Divine Steed, it is such a game changer in my opinion. I love it. I'm glad that they actually put it in. We're going to be grabbing Casting Judgment, increases the damage of Empyrean Hammer by 10%, and the multiple applications may overlap. So the same exact thing that I was talking about earlier with the Greater of Judgment is going to work hand in hand with this Sanctification as well. And then our last talent is gaining a stack of Deliverance when you call down an Empyrean Hammer, because we want to be able to generate those as much as possible. While Wake of Ashes and Hammer of Light are unavailable, you consume 60 stacks of Light's Deliverance, empowering yourself to cast Hammer of Light an additional time for free. So there are going to be scenarios where your Wake of Ashes may be on cooldown, and you're going to be given a free Hammer of Light to spawn in to hit on whatever, and then you're also obviously going to synergize with your Empyrean Hammers to do even more damage. I want to talk about our PvP talents real quick. So I do take Hallowed Ground because our Blade of Justice is going to cast a Consecration on the ground on your target, not on yourself, and it's going to clear up any kind of snare effect. So if you're on your target and your target ends up blinking away or whatever, and you cast a Consecration on them, if they got any kind of slow on you, it's going to get removed. So it works really well with this build overall. I take Lawbringer as well, which is going to give us a little bit more damage every time you use Judgment. So like I said, you're going to be casting Judgment a lot. And then Aura of Reckoning is when you or your allies within your aura are critically struck, gain a Reckoning, gain 1 additional stack, and at 100 stacks, your next weapon swing will deal 200% increased damage, will critically strike and activate Crusade for 9 seconds. So this is going to give us Crusade outside of our burst. And whenever that happens, that's just icing on the cake. So that works really well as well. There's really no other choices. I mean, you could go with a more, like for 3s, for example, or even maybe BGs, go with Blessing of Sanctuary. Spreading the word could help you and benefit you, but honestly, I don't think it's very viable either. And the last one I would mention would be Blessing of Spell Warding, is just to bop them from any kind of magical spells, because bop only protects from physical. You may want to grab that in case you're running against a caster damage. Some people will go with luminescence maybe in 3s, or even BGs. BGs would work because there's healing going on kind of from everywhere. But luminescence could help you in 3s maybe, but in 2s, if you're working with just a healer, then it could benefit there as well. But those are the only PvP talents that I would say to take over any of the others. Going over gear set priority. All right, so we're going to be looking at versatility. All right, every guide I want to mention that versatility increases your healing and your damage on players, and your healing to yourself, and the damage reduction against players due to you. So you definitely want to stack as much versatility as possible along with mastery. So mastery is going to increase our holy damage, which is going to just give us a ton more damage when we do our holy power spending abilities like Final Verdict or Hammer of Light. And we're going to be looking at haste equals crit, so meaning they weigh the same. So depending on your playstyle, maybe you want more haste, maybe you want more crit just to hit harder. Personally, I go for haste every time. Like I said, it's just so much better on a paladin. It just feels so much more nicer, and your generating abilities keep up with their cooldowns and how many procs you can get. It's just very nice overall. So I always go haste. That's just my opinion. So if you want to go with crit, you're more than welcome to, just to hit a little bit harder. All right, so that's what our stat priorities are looking at for PvP. All right, looking at our burst rotation. So our burst, like I said, has a ton of synergy, and it's going to come through our judgment primarily, Wake of Ashes, and generating as many as possible of holy power. And we want to try and build up 5 holy power in a quick window when we have holy light up. All right, so what that's going to look like is we're going to cast judgment first. We're going to cast Blade of Justice. That's going to give us 2 holy power right there. We're going to cast Wake of Ashes. That generates 3 holy power. So we're going to have a total of 5 right off the bat. We're going to pop our burst to increase our damage and haste. And at the same time, it's going to cast Final Reckoning. I do have a macro that just casts it. It's a very simple macro, nothing fancy. It just literally casts the Avengers Crusade, whatever it's called. Just Crusade. It's going to cast Crusade, and then it's going to cast Final Reckoning on that spot. Very simple macro. Anyways, so when you cast those 2, you have all your holy power generated, and then you're going to get a Hammer of Light instantly. When that happens, right after that Hammer of Light, we're going to cast Divine Toll to get that judgment out again, and continuously passively for 15 seconds get another judgment. We're going to cast Judgment again, get those multiple stacks, Blade of Fist, maybe Templar Strike, depending on what our rotation is doing or if they're getting away, because Blade of Justice does a decent amount of damage. And then if we can get that Templar Strike off, that's what we want. So that's the whole goal, is to get as many as Hammer of Lights off in that window before it turns back into Wake of Ashes. And in that time when that cooldown is off, we're going to be casting Final Verdict. So our build is going to look like this. All right, Judgment, Blade of Justice, Burst, Macro, Final Reckoning, Wake of Ashes into Imperial Hammer. I'm going to cast Templar Strikes, get that off, Judgment, Fist, Wrath, and Empyrean Light. So I didn't mention the Hammer of Wrath. We want to cast that over Judgments because of the amount of damage it does. So in a perfect scenario, you get at least 2 Hammer of Lights in that window, like I did, and then you're just going to be casting Final Verdict consistently. So you do want to cast Hammer of Wrath over Judgment unless your Judgment buff is off. If your Judgment buff is off that target, you're going to want to cast that Judgment, get that off, and then rinse and repeat. So like I said, Wake of Ashes on a 30-second cooldown, so it comes up fairly quick, and you always want to be thinking, okay, I want to have at least 2 holy power when my Wake of Ashes comes off. So, for example, when I'm at 5 stacks, I will not cast Wake of Ashes just to get that Empyrean Light off or anything. I'm going to cast that Verdict first. So, it's going to take 3. I have 2 left, then I'm cast Wake of Ashes and then Empyrean Light. And that's how I would play that build consistently. Now, if you're trying to get as much damage out as quickly as possible as, as for like a kill target or something like that, then yeah, absolutely get that Wake of Ashes off, get that hard-hitting Hammer of Light. But overall, if you can wait, get the better sustained damage out, Final Verdict, Wake of Ashes, Hammer of Light, and you're always going to be wanting hitting that Wrath. That Hammer of Wrath does way more damage to that Judgment. Like I said, the only time you want to throw out that Judgment is if you're missing your buff. So, once again, even without the burst, your sustain is literally the same. It's not going to change anything other than you don't have wings. So whenever you don't have wings, your sustain is going to be Judgment, Final Verdict. All right, so I do want to talk about this buff, Divine Purpose. When you have this scenario, you always want to get your Hammer of Light off instantly, or as quick as possible. So Wake of Ashes, I'm gonna get that Empyrean Hammer. Now I think the buff went away right as I cast that. But you'll be able to get 2 Empyrean Hammers off at the exact same time. So that's kind of the goal that we want to do. So looking at our defensives, I used to never cast Word of Glory because it healed like a wet noodle. I hated it, but now it actually heals you a good amount. So Word of Glory is definitely worth hitting. It costs 3 holy power, and it can sometimes heal over a mil. I mean, it actually does it kind of frequently. So definitely cast Word of Glory for a defensive over Flash of Light. If you can spend it for the defensive, you should always play defensive maybe a little bit heavier than offensive, especially if you're in your burst window. If they're nuking you down, cast that Word of Glory. It heals for a lot, heal Flash of Light. And then you have your Shield of Vengeance and Divine Protection as well. So it's going to reduce our damage by 20%. I think in PvP it's actually 10%. And then Shield of Vengeance creates that barrier on yourself. We also are spec'd into Blessing of Sacrifice. I'm more excited for the 11.0.5 patch because this is going to passively place it on whatever target when they reach a certain amount of health. I don't actually cast it. The only reason why I took it is so I can grab Healing Hands. But I don't really use this unless my teammate is really dying and I don't have any other cooldowns. But you have your Bop, you have your Lay on Hands, you can use that on yourself or your target, and then you have your shield as well. So Divine Shield is going to grant immunity to everybody. This is the move that literally everybody hates. So those are our primary defensives, and we do have a stun, 6 seconds. It's a hard-hitting stun. It is magical, and the reason why I say that is because Shamans have that grounding totem. So if you throw out a stun when the Shaman has its grounding totem out, it's going to eat it. You're not going to stun your target. So just be aware that it is considered a magical stun, which means you could also dispel it. If you guys have appreciated this guide or liked this guide or learned something from it, let me know down in the comments down below what you would like to see next as far as what other class or spec. If you have any kind of questions, let me know. I've been playing Paladin for so many years. I love it. It's probably going to be one of my new mains that I actually play heavily in the War Within. If you like this video, like I said, please subscribe. That'd be awesome. I stream every other day, and peace.